had another video planned for this week, but oh my god, this week in particular has just been an endless parade of misogyny, and I need to talk about it. In the UK, Laurence Fox spent airtime on GB News making horrid remarks about journalist Ava Evans, while Dan Wootton did nothing but politely chuckle along. He didn't exactly participate, but he didn't put a stop to it either, which he should have done the moment the first words came out of Lawrence's mouth. Also, text came out of him laughing about it afterwards. Ava is not a celebrity. She's not put her face out there for people to see. She is a journalist. And Laurence Fox decided to say this.
We're past the watershed, so I can say this. Show me a single self-respecting man that would like to climb into bed with that woman, ever. Who wasn't an incel, who wasn't a cucked little incel. That little woman has been fed, spoon-fed oppression day after day after day after day, starting with the lie of the gender wage gap. And she sat there and I'm going like, if I met you in a bar and that was like sentence 3, chances of me just walking away are just huge and embarrassing. Who'd want to shag that?
To be clear, it would be just as bad to say this about a celebrity. Nobody deserves to be talked about this way. I'm just saying for frame of reference that she did not sign up to a career where specifically her looks are scrutinised. Just reducing this woman to a set of stereotypes he can fashion into a straw man of his own making and then complain that he doesn't want to shag it. Okay, well maybe she doesn't exist just to want to get shagged by you overworn, stained carpet of a man. Oh, I'm sorry. Is her feminism too much for you? Does she just have too much agency for you to handle, you tiny little man? GB News immediately backpedaled and suspended both men and seemed surprised to learn as a journalistic institution that free speech is not freedom from consequence. Let me check something, one sec. Yes, it is, in fact, the year of our Lord 2023. Following this, Moya McLean was on Sky News supposedly for an interview about misogyny, which then became a discussion, and right before they went on air, a debate about free speech. She then discovered that in this debate, where she was discussing the frustrations of being a woman and constantly having to fight harder to get what men get and then being reduced to only our looks, that the man there to debate her was being paid to be there while she was not.
Laurence Fox and what Laurence Fox felt enabled to say is because of a much wider picture. And it's tiring to me. It's so tiring to me as a woman to come on here.
I'm sorry you're so exhausted to be paid to go on air. I'm not paid.
I'm not being paid for this interview. I came on because I wanted to talk about the problem of misogyny and the degradation of women in public life. Well, are you getting paid for this? I'm not getting paid for this. Are you getting paid for this?
That was the moment I realised that the man who was invited onto Sky News to say that misogyny didn't exist was getting paid for the interview when I wasn't. Now, not only did it transpire Connor was getting paid and I wasn't, but I was initially offered a compensatory fee of £75, the standard for interview like that. However, after an apology from Sky, this was up to £200. Why? Because it turned out Connor had bagged a £200 fee for that 10-minute chat. Just think about that for a minute. Man gets paid £200 to deny that structural misogyny exists. Woman gets paid nothing. Meanwhile, the Laurence Fox GB News clip that sparked this all was Fox denying the gender pay gap exists. This really does write itself.
If you wrote this into a script, your first notes would be too on the nose. Before all of that happened, the allegations broke against Russell Brand of his horrendous treatment of women, some as young as 16 years old, which has sparked an actual investigation by the Met Police. Russell claims this is all a lie and a psyop by the evil mainstream media to silence him because he's speaking the truth. The truth being a bunch of nutjob right-wing conspiracy theories. And paragons of virtue, such as Elon Musk, Andrew Tate, Tucker Carlson, Katie Hopkins, and Alex Jones, all jumped to defend him. Yeah, you're in great company there, Russell. That doesn't make you look more suspicious at all. Here's the tip. If you want to prove that the claims made against you are fabricated, you probably don't want to be publicly supported by the biggest misogynistic bullshit peddlers, and sometimes just straight up bullshit peddlers in general, on the planet. To top things off in the UK this week, a 15-year-old girl was stabbed to death by a boy with a machete when she turned down his advances. That boy brought a machete to the interaction, planning to use it if she said no. And then men wonder why women can't just blindly trust them, why we talk around issues and say things like, I have a boyfriend, even if we don't, because you personally might not beat me to death if I say no to you, but I don't know that. Remember when Donald Trump compared Syrian refugees to poisoned Skittles? Like, if 3 Skittles in a bowl were poisoned, but you didn't know which ones, would you still eat the Skittles? That was a bad analogy for refugees because we have statistics on the safety of them, and they're overwhelmingly less likely to commit crimes, largely because their biggest fear is being deported back to the place they've escaped from, and committing crimes will lead to that happening. But the origin of that metaphor, as Vox explains, the online poisoned candy metaphor started with feminists pushing back against the complaint that not all men are misogynists. In its original version, the Skittles meme was about poisoned M&Ms. Anti-feminists shot back, substituting Muslims for men in the analogy to demonstrate how offensive it would otherwise be. Then, truly missing the point, conservatives adopted it over the past year as a genuine argument that any migration from Syria is too big a risk. Women want to eat M&Ms. We want to feel safe around men. We love men. Some of my best friends are men, and as a bisexual, I'm even attracted to some of you. You know who you are. But we don't know which one of you seemingly normal guys is secretly a crazy person until the crazy comes out. And with the rise of Andrew Tate fanboys, our ability to vibe check is getting more and more clouded because to us, it feels like it's everywhere, and it's constant, and it's proliferating. Probably because it fucking is. A girl is dead because a boy couldn't take rejection. And it's not the first time and it won't be the last, but it is particularly heartbreaking because she was only 15 and all she did was say no. All I can do is send condolences to her family and wish them the strength it takes to get through this and hope that this boy gets locked up for a very long time. But none of that takes away what he did. Across the pond in the US, things aren't much better. Britney Spears posted a video of herself dancing with knives and immediately half the internet started coming down on her saying she should be scrutinised and back in a conservatorship again, which is just unbelievably inhumane. Never mind that she clarified later that they were fake knives. Never mind that she was doing an homage to something Shakira did earlier. Never mind that regardless of whether or not her behaviour makes you uncomfortable, she doesn't and has never deserved to be in a conservatorship. She's doing weird things on the internet, so lock her up. Get a grip, all of you. Do you think if we didn't have the prior knowledge of her conservatorship and she posted this, people would have reacted the same way? Say, for example, Olivia Rodrigo posted this. Do you think anybody would be crying that it wasn't safe? No. I'm pretty sure we'd all either immediately assume they were fake knives, or that if she was dancing with them, she'd been trained properly. The only reason you're assuming that not to be the case where Britney is concerned is because of a prior expectation that her parents spent years setting up in the public, so we'd all think she was worthy of being trapped by them. It's a fallacy, and one far too many people have bought into. And naturally, being trapped for so long has made her a little weird. Y'all, and I'm including myself in this, got weird being in lockdowns for barely a year and a half, and she's been unable to make her own decisions for far longer than that. It'll make a person weird, maybe off color. It might make you feel uncomfortable, but there's an easy response to that. Don't fucking look! Leave her alone. Let her do her little dances with her knives without threatening to take her dogs away, you helicopter parent-ass freaks! That's a whole human person. She exists away from what she projects online, and you don't get to decide she's a danger to herself from one quite literally harmless video. If she is in some kind of danger, she has people around her who will know far better than you, a random stranger on the internet. Not to quote a deep cut, but leave Britney alone! In a slight left turn from that, did anybody else see that video that went semi-viral on Twitter this week of a woman at a gas station accompanied by the tweet, "You cannot convince me pretty privilege is real when this happens every day. Sometimes you really wish you were mid because of the safety boost it provides." And yes, they have spelled privilege wrong. This is such a pointlessly stupid take, I kind of don't even want to address it, but it's reached a point now where too many people actually believe shit like this, so to be incredibly clear, it's utter bollocks. I do not have pretty privilege. And before any of you wonderful, well-meaning people jump into my comments to be like, "What are you talking about? You're so pretty." That's super kind of you, but unnecessary. I think I'm very hot. I am also well aware that I am not stereotypical Barbie. This isn't a self-confidence issue, it's a societal thing. I'm overweight, short, and not that attractive, and I've never in my life felt desirable to others. Men don't fall over themselves to be nice to me, I don't get catcalled or hit on, and yet, I am terrified of walking home alone in the dark. Saying you're more in danger from men because you're pretty has exactly the same energy as saying thin discrimination is just as big of an issue as fat phobia. I'm not saying you haven't felt discriminated against, but you haven't been refused jobs or avoided on the subway or had every aspect of your life torn to shreds. Fat people can only exist if they're doing everything possible not to be fat, and even then they'll be scrutinized. We can't even just eat a burger the way thin people can, because Lizzo's whole brand, before the recent drama, was about being a so-called healthy fat person who exercised and ate healthy constantly, and she was still shit on for spreading an unhealthy lifestyle, just for existing while fat. I have overweight friends who eat healthier and exercise more than I have ever done in my life. I have thin friends who eat like shit and have never seen the inside of a gym. None of that makes any of them any more or less worthy of respect than each other, and I'm so tired of pretending I have to want to be thinner in order to get around in the world. I don't want to be thinner, or look more like an Instagram model. I'm happy as I am, but I became that way in spite of the patriarchy, not because of it. The pressure women feel at all times about their appearance comes entirely from patriarchy. I have never in my life worn makeup to look pretty to men. I wear it because I like rainbows, and I was always confused by the idea that it was for anybody but me. And also I was asexual, but I didn't know that yet, which makes a lot of sense in hindsight, in that I literally had no concept of attracting people. But throughout my teen years, multiple people assumed that if I had makeup on, it was to impress someone. I once put on eyeshadow to go to the shops with my friend, and when I left my room, my dad assumed I was actually going on a secret date with a boy and pressured me about it, despite my obvious confusion and repeated denials. He said I must have put the makeup on for somebody, and I said, yeah, me. And he scoffed and said, nobody puts on makeup for themselves. You're clearly doing it to impress somebody, whether you're meeting someone or you just want the attention of strangers. And that stuck with me, because that was the first time that I realised that a lot of men, and a surprising amount of women, also think this is how the world works. Because hot women who post things like this aren't complaining about how hard it is to be pretty. Not really. They're also exhibiting misogyny. Look how much harder it is for me to be pretty than you less attractive women, because men desire me so much more. Like being thin, I'm sure there are aspects of being stereotypically pretty that do in fact make life harder, but being scared in gas stations and alone at night and in the company of strange men is not exclusive to hot women. In fact, there are studies done that show less stereotypically attractive people are more likely to be harassed than otherwise, because we're seen as easy targets. And even worse, when we are harassed, we're less likely to be believed. That's also insane amounts of misogyny, by the way. Assuming that uggos don't get assaulted, and then even when we are, downplaying that and assuming we're less affected by it, that's all misogyny. This Insider article lays it all out. I've linked it below. I've been assaulted. I've been groped in clubs against my will. I've had people try to force kisses on me. I've had men react badly when I turn them down, or even when I just haven't noticed they've been flirting with me and don't react exactly the way they want or expected. I never felt very pretty when any of this stuff was happening to me, because it's not about me. It's not about how attractive I am. It's about power. That's all it's ever about with men like that. They want to exercise power over somebody they see as lesser than them because they can. As Denisha points out in her response to the original tweet, perpetuating the idea that those things occur due to attractiveness sets the conversation around those things back tremendously. Additionally, pretty privilege isn't the argument that bad things don't happen to you when you're pretty, lol. It's the argument, supported by data, see halo effect, that you're treated infinitely better, casually in day-to-day life, and professionally, when you're pretty. If any of the people bothering you at that gas station actually did anything to you, people would care more than normal, because you're pretty. It comes from the exact same school of thought as, like, the sluttier you dress, the more likely you are to be attacked. It's just fundamentally not true. Women in full burqas have been attacked by men. It is not about how you look, and it never has been. Pretty privilege is real because of misogyny, but unattractive women are more in danger of being attacked also because of misogyny. Two things can be true. And speaking of people caring more if you're pretty, I also want to talk about transmisogyny. Because I assume for most of this video that there have been TERFs who've stumbled across it who are agreeing with me and are getting ready to type things like, "This is why we have to exclude trans women from the conversation, because men will do anything to infiltrate women's spaces and make them feel uncomfortable." And to those people, I would suggest taking a very long walk off a very short pier. For legal reasons, this is a joke. If you'll allow me, let me get on TERF's level just for a moment and talk to them like I give a shit what they think. This whole storm you've brewed around finding trans women in spaces, clocking trans women in spaces, seeking out more masculine features in female-presenting bodies in order to single them out and exclude them, super fucking misogynistic of you, babes. Some women have naturally masculine features. Some women have wider shoulders, straighter hips, flatter chests. Some butch women accentuate those features on purpose. By making it a personal mission to single out those features on every woman you see in case they're secretly a trans person, you're not just harming trans women, which is what I assume you want, you're also harming cis women. Any little insecurity they have will be increased tenfold if it can be used against them to perpetuate transphobia, which means that if you label yourself a quote-unquote real woman, you have to start performing the ideal perception of femininity in order to be seen as a quote-unquote real woman. And where does the ideal perception of femininity come from, you ask? Patriarchy. Shocker. So many TERFs, these self-labeled radical feminists, are peddling such unbelievably misogynistic ideas that they're more at home with Andrew Tate's fanboys than they are with normal human beings who aren't obsessed with the genitals of every person they speak to. Seriously, TERFs, I'm genuinely asking. It doesn't bother you that people like that are on your side? That actual Nazis are on your side? You don't even feel a tiny little bit like you're on the wrong side of history here? I'm so exhausted with TERF rhetoric at this point that I now no longer trust people who start a sentence with "as a woman" or try to discuss female-centric experiences without holding my breath for them to segue into some kind of transphobic rambling, which is frustrating because it's just pitting more of us against each other while misogyny remains untouched and, in fact, actively getting worse. Hope Not Hate conducted a survey which found that 8 in 10 boys in the UK aged 16 to 17 had consumed Tate's content. More than knew who our literal Prime Minister is. More terrifyingly, 45% of men in Britain aged 16 to 24 had a positive view of him. This is post-incarceration, by the way. This is terrifying. I'm sure I don't have to explain why. I have teacher friends who have to see this up close and personal, and all of them are worried about it. An interview about the effects of misogyny turned into a debate about free speech because people care more about men's rights to say degrading things about women than they do about the women affected by those words. It shouldn't be up for debate to say that saying things like that is horrendously out of line, especially when Laurence Fox is on Twitter saying this. I'm not even going to read that out loud. You just have to witness it the way I did. As Rose Stokes pointed out, it's actually crazy that he can't see a link between his own behaviour, seeing a woman as a sexual object whose value depends on his interest in her, and the brutal murder of a young girl who was stabbed by a man because she was not interested in him. That's not even two sides of the same coin. It's literally the same side of the same coin. Women are deemed worthy of existing based on how much men want us, and if we happen across a man who thinks this way, it's our own fault for ending up in his path. But also, how dare we be afraid of all men and just assume the worst at all times? That makes you a woman I don't want to shag, rinse and repeat until the catch-22 of it all drives you completely round the twist. And I am. Completely round the twist.
Have you ever felt like this?
Yes. Of course I felt like this. I've been feeling like this since I was old enough to conceptualize that to other people, my face isn't for me. My body isn't for me. They're for the consumption of others, of men. And if I don't fit into their idea of attractiveness, then I will be respected less, but still in just as much danger of being harassed. That's a terrible trade, by the way. I brought this up in my Barbie video, but sexiness isn't there for men to act on it. It just is. As a bisexual woman, I have seen countless women in swimsuits or half-naked in change rooms. I have seen girls dressed up to go clubbing, seen friends in the sluttiest outfits imaginable for Halloween, and I have never once hit on these women or gone out of my way to get in their space because I have an understanding of boundaries. Flirting is one thing, that's reciprocal. Some of you seem to willfully misunderstand this when I brought that up in my video, as if I'm saying that nobody is ever allowed to flirt with anybody they find attractive ever again, but that's never been what I'm talking about. If sapphic women can have the self-control not to make women fear for their lives in their presence, then it should be literally the bare minimum for men to do the same. But some men can't even manage that. When I was 17 and working at Costa, I worked with a man who was 45 and hit on me every single shift. He joked about marrying me, he touched me all the time, and he didn't make a secret of it, but people brushed it off because he seemed effeminate and people assumed he was gay. Even if he was gay, I was 17 years old and he was 45. That is still inappropriate. But he wasn't gay. And I was uncomfortable. But I was a teenager, so all I felt I could do was bite my tongue. After I turned 18, it continued. Obviously. I went on holiday, and the last shift I had before I left, he cornered me, demanded a hug in that way that only the creepiest of men do, and when I gave in, he turned his head and kissed me repeatedly on the neck. And I froze. Because I was raised in an abusive household, and that's my fight or flight mechanism. He released me, and I smiled politely, and I left. And 2 months later, when I brought this up to the male colleague who had been on shift with us, he asked me why I didn't say anything to him at the time, because he would have had a go at this man. And I had to point out that he hadn't exactly been a safe person to go to with things, that he often laughed and played along when this man made advances on me. And I think he was really surprised that those things made me too uncomfortable to go to him when I felt violated, even though it happened less than 5 feet from him. I hope it's made him reevaluate how he is around women in the future, but I don't know. He's a cop now, so probably not. As for the 45-year-old, who knows? I still shudder thinking about how violating that moment was for me, how terrified I was, how much bigger and stronger and scarier than me this man was, how I knew it was easier to say nothing, do nothing, and just get out of there as quickly as possible than to fight back or kick up a fuss. That's not even close to the worst thing that's happened to me at the hands of a man, by the way. It's just the story I feel highlights my feelings about this the most. Men. When women around you do not feel safe enough to come to you when something happens to them, that means you are part of the problem. Regardless of how that makes you feel, this ain't about you. Speak to any woman in your life. If you don't think you know somebody who's been made to feel unsafe because they're a woman, it's not because it isn't happening, it's because they're not telling you. Think about why that is. I'm so tired of feeling unsafe. I'm so tired of seeing women attacked for rejecting men, trans women attacked for not performing femininity to the arbitrary standards bigots have set for them, mentally ill women attacked for not being palatable to people, abuse survivors attacked for supposedly trying to gain clout with their stories. It's all so exhausting. I don't have any solutions because as long as we keep entertaining misogyny as free speech, we're never going to be unshackled from it. Free speech isn't freedom from consequences, but a lot of men seem to believe it is, and allowing them to continue in this belief is going to put women in danger. It takes an unfathomable amount of strength to get up every day and face the world knowing what we're going to see, and it gets harder every day. A journalist was degraded on national television. A pop star was treated exactly how her father treated her because he spent years convincing us she was a danger to herself. Trans women are being disproportionately targeted by women who are so obsessed with being women that they're exerting the toxic ideals of the patriarchy over every other woman they see. Russell Brand's actions were an open secret in the industry, and he's not the only one. A 15-year-old girl is dead because a man thought a machete was a reasonable thing to bring with him in case he was rejected. I'm so tired of it all. Just had enough. And that's just this week. This isn't a year in misogyny. That's this week. Just like genuinely, to some men, if there are still men watching, which who knows, can you imagine getting up every single day and seeing headlines about men being murdered for saying no to women, about men being degraded in the streets? Imagine turning on the news and seeing 2 female reporters just go to town on this male reporter, talking about how he's so unbelievably unshaggable because he doesn't share the same opinions as them. Can you imagine? Genuinely. Really try and think about it. Really try and put yourself in our shoes, where every day you walk outside and you just get hit with an onslaught of constant misogynistic bullshit all the time. It's scary being a woman. And I hate that it's scary being a woman. I hate that it's scarier for trans women to be women. It's so frustrating. This week has really beaten me down, hope-wise. It's like we've been set back 10, 15, 20 years in just under a year and a half. And I don't know how to claw that progress back. Not just for women, but for trans people, gay people, immigrants, people of color. In the last 2 years, 18 months, 2 years, things have gone so drastically backwards in terms of acceptance and progress and forward thinking, and it's really, really, really scary. And there are people out there, the same people who are like, both political parties are the same, who will roll their eyes and be like, oh, it's always been bad. It is those exact people who aren't paying attention to the news, who aren't listening to the women in their lives. And some of them are women, but they're stupid women. Feminism is acknowledging that women have the capability to be stupid too. It's just frustrating. And I've just had enough. I've just had enough. Did I not put on makeup today as a way to make a point about makeup industry? Or am I just ill? Both. I like wearing makeup for me. I like matching my eyeshadow to my outfit. I like doing crazy drag look. The way my gender queerness works is like putting makeup on for me isn't about being a woman. It's about performing femininity. Those are different things to me. I don't think in my life I've ever put on natural makeup. Ever. If I'm putting on makeup, I'm committing, because what is the point in layering 15 things onto my face just to have my face look slightly yassified? And I get that for women, that is important to them. But as somebody who doesn't solely identify as a woman, I've never understood it. And I think if we were in a lot less of a patriarchal society, there would be a lot less women aiming for natural makeup looks. There'd be a lot less women getting plastic surgeries. There'd be a lot less trans women feeling the need to get gender affirming surgeries in order to feel that they are the gender identity that they are. In a world where we didn't put so much onus on what it means to look like a woman, there would be so much less strife. And that's all on patriarchy. That's all on misogyny. And it's exhausting. I want to trust men. I want to like men. I want to believe that men have my best interest at heart, but I just don't. I can't. For my own safety, I can't. And that sucks. Men, talk to the women in your lives. Women, stay strong. Hold it together. Hold each other's hands. Get through this all. And hey, if all else fails, we could just start killing men. And young?
Have you ever felt like this? How strange